Hi, it's Nicole. I'm starting a vlog this morning trying to solve a murder mystery. I started reading a new novel by Dorothy L last night, and in this video I'm going to try to figure out who the murderer is as I read, as I collect information and evidence, and I will check in with you every now and then to tell you what happened so far and who I think the murderer is. A note on Dorothy L if you are not familiar with her. She was a British crime writer like Agatha Christie, writing and publishing about the same time as Agatha Christie, which was between the two world wars, and it was called the golden age of British detective fiction. Sayers was a Christian, she was friends with C.S. Lewis, and she was academic as well. She studied modern language and medieval literature in Oxford University, and she translated Dante's Divine Comedy. Some say she was a better writer than Agatha Christie. I can't tell who's a better writer, but I did read two novels by Christie and one by Sayers so far, and I did prefer Sayers' story. I read Then There Were None and Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie. Both were quite dark and quite bitter, and the murder was driven by hatred, which I guess is common because it's a murder. You have to hate somebody enough to kill them, which surprised me even more knowing this, that Sayers' story, the murder was not a murder, if you know what I mean, and I don't want to spoil the story. The one I read by Sayers was The Nine Tailors, which I think was excellent. It was quite surprising how she treated the murder, and I was quite struck by how kind she was. So the one I'm starting now is called 5 Red Herrings. I'll read you a little bit of a blurb in the introduction. So the basic plot has Lord Peter Wimsey on vacation in Scottish Highlands. So Lord Peter Wimsey is the detective, the main character in most of her detective novels. So he went to Scottish Highland and encountering a group of painters, one of whom is discovered dead at the bottom of a cliff. The book points up for the reader exactly the question that Wimsey asks the police about the murder scene, the fact that something is missing. What is it? The 6 surviving painters all have considerable reason to dislike the unpleasant murder victim, and of the 6, 5 are the red herrings. And the particular pleasure of the book is matching wits with Wimsey in figuring out who the murderer is, despite the fact that their alibis all appear to be waterproof. So it sounds like a perfect murder mystery I might regret later on. So I'll see you in a couple of days. It's going to be too shaky, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to summarize what happened so far in the story. Peter Wimsey was having a holiday in Scotland Lowlands, about the Galloway area, not Scotland Highlands as is suggested in the introduction. Wimsey was having a holiday in Scotland, and it's a artist and fisherman community. And the story started in a pub where 2 main characters nearly had a fight. From that fight, and also conversation just generally from the pub, we learned that Campbell, which was one of the people involved in this fight, he was not a very popular character. He seems to have problems with everybody. So on his way home, he nearly had a car accident. That turned out to be the last time we saw him alive. The next thing we hear, the next morning, his body was found about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the hills somewhere in a river. Well, the river is in the hills and the body was in the river. So his body was found about 2 o'clock, and somebody spotted him painting at that spot about 10 to 11 o'clock in the morning. It looked like he was painting there, and he stepped back and slipped and fell down a cliff and drowned in the river. Lord Peter Wimsey heard this report and drove to the scene. And what did he see? So he saw some police officers there. Obviously, they were investigating the situation, and Peter Wimsey saw a oil painting on the easel. He searched the bag and the pockets of this dead man's coat and his car as well, and seemed to be looking for something. He looked everywhere and couldn't find it. I asked the police officers to look for it as well, and they couldn't find anything. And it must be something very important, because he came to the conclusion that it was not an accident, it was actually a murder. The frustrating thing is he didn't tell us what's missing. He just said something's missing. And there's just a bracket in the middle of the story saying, I'm not telling you what it is. That's super frustrating, because I have no idea about art supplies. The items Wimsey found in this dead man's pockets and bags were all kind of laid out on the ground, one after another. There were a lot of paint tubes, and the paint tubes all have different colors. There's various colors, and there's brushes and palette knives and all sorts. But I know nothing about art or oil painting or art supplies, so I have no idea what's missing. I feel like I need to speak to some friends who do oil painting and see if they can help me with that. Peter Wimsey decided it's murder, and so he drew up a list of 6 suspects who are all artists in this community, and who have all, in one way or another, had some argument with Campbell. So at the moment where I'm reading, Peter Wimsey is walking around the 2 villages, 2 towns, and trying to find out all these suspects. Where have they been? What have they been doing? If they have alibis, and trying to find out who the murderer is. One thing important I forgot to say: when Wimsey decided this was a murder and not an accident, one reason was that this object was missing, and the second reason was that the person was killed a long time ago. So the doctor examined the body and found that the person was dead from about midnight, so just after the car accident. Somebody spotted him painting that morning at about 10, from 10 to 11 o'clock, and that could not be him. He was dead by then, so the person painting there was very likely to be the murderer, pretend to be Campbell, wearing his hat and coat, giving the impression that he's still alive at that point. That's long-winded, but that's what I was trying to say. Sorry about the shaky footage. I will now show you something steady on the screen. So here is a table of my suspects' profiles, things I collected so far. I will go through them one by one, and you can pause the video and read my notes, but I won't go through them in great detail. I'll just give you a brief overview of each person. Michael Waters was the guy in the pub that nearly had a fight with Campbell before he died. And it seems like they didn't have a history of anything against each other. It was just that evening they were both a bit drunk and had some arguments about Scotland and England, which one was mightier. Waters went home that night, and it sounds like the next morning he went to Glasgow with 2 ladies for a exhibition. But it turned out when those 2 ladies came back that he was not actually on the train with them, and they didn't see him in Glasgow either. Next one is Hugh Farren. Hugh Farren is slightly more suspicious. He lives with his wife. On the evening before the murder, Campbell was with Farren's wife in their house, and apparently Farren's wife, Gilda, was the only person in the whole place that was friendly to Campbell, so Campbell was quite attracted to her, and apparently there were rumors and there were threats, and it sounds like it was quite intense. They were spending time with each other on the afternoon, and Farren came home in the evening about 6, and Farren Farron found Campbell in his house and he was very angry and he kicked him out. And Campbell went to the pub and wanted to have a good fight with anybody, and that was the scene in the pub at the beginning. And apparently after Campbell left, Farron had some angry words with his wife and left home on his bike. Didn't come home on Monday night and didn't come home on Tuesday night either. And when Wimsey went around looking at places and talking to people, he saw his wife in the doorway looking anxiously into the street and waiting for Farron to come back. But there was a second person and it was a man. And so that's the situation with Farron. Next one is Matthew Gowan. Matthew Gowan didn't feature in Campbell's monologue at all, so we're not very clear what was wrong between them. When the inspector went to Gowan's house on Wednesday, we learned that Gowan left Kirkcudbright for London or for Carlisle. We are not sure exactly where he went, but he got on the train from Dumfries. He's not around either, and we're not sure for certain where he was when the murder happened. Next one is Jock Graham. He is a quite interesting character. If you look at the chief constable's opinion on this person, apparently he is very clever. He can carry out ingenious crime if he has to, and he has a cool head to carry it through, and he can tell lies and look completely innocent. His problem with Campbell, I don't think it's anything hateful, it's more he's a nuisance. He would specifically, deliberately fish under Campbell's bedroom window, and Campbell would probably a bit unreasonably say, "This is my patch of the river, this is where I fish, you can't fish here." And then Graham would say, "I will fish here, what are you going to do to me?" He was missing on Monday night as well. A police officer asked him where he was and he just flat out refused to answer. He said, "It's none of your business, I'm not going to tell you." Next one is Henry Strand. Lord Wimsey visited Strand on Tuesday afternoon, which is the day the body was found. So he went to their house straight away and Strand's wife was there. Strand looked pale and upset and he had a black eye. He said it was from a golf ball. His wife said he was at home last night, but their daughter said he was not at home at night and Mummy was frightened. So that make him suspicious as well. The last one is John Ferguson. John Ferguson is Campbell's only neighbor. Their two cottages are right next to each other and they share a garden wall. And their problem is this garden wall. Apparently Campbell's car backed into this wall and the wall collapsed. Campbell refused to fix it because he said the wall was already falling down because there was this great tree and the roots were all underneath it and breaking up the foundation, etc., etc. On the day of murder, so on Tuesday morning, Ferguson was seen at the train station just past 9 o'clock and he went to Glasgow on that train. And the two ladies who went to Glasgow for the exhibition I mentioned at the beginning, they saw him at Glasgow a couple of times and had conversation with him, so it sounds like he was clear, he was not suspicious at this point. Hello, I have a major development to report. We now actually have an eyewitness. This poor girl saw the car accident and something else as well. So here's what happened. At 9:45 on Monday night, two cars nearly crashed into each other at a S-bend between Kirkcudbright and Gatehouse. So Campbell's car was from Kirkcudbright towards Gatehouse and the other car was coming down from Gatehouse to Kirkcudbright and they met at this S-bend. And they nearly crashed. There were a lot of shouting and fighting. Both of them came out of the car. They were fighting all over the place. They were on the ground. When they finished, one of them stood up, carried the other one to the car, to the two-seater. Sorry, I forgot to say. Campbell was driving a four-seater and the other car was a two-seater. So the person that stood up carried the dead body to the two-seater and drove off towards the north, which is the gatehouse direction. So it sounds like the two-seater came down, met Campbell and drove back with the dead body. So the girl saw the whole thing. After this two-seater drove off, this four-seater, Campbell's car, was left in the middle of the road, was still there. So she thought, oh, I'm going to go up and have a look. So she was just about to go up and have a look. She heard footsteps coming from the gatehouse direction. So she thought, oh no, the killer has come back to kill me as well. So she ran a bit, she ran home, and she heard engine started up. So she hid again because she thought this car is going to now chase after her. So she hid for a little bit, but nothing happened. So she thought, okay, let's try going home again. So she ran a bit more. She ran all the way home, which is near the accident, the place of the accident. As she got into the gate, a car drove, it says, furiously towards Kirkcudbright, which is the other direction. When she got back home, it was 5 minutes past 10. This is the eyewitness account, and this is what the inspector thinks. The inspector thinks when the two cars met each other and they had their fight, Campbell was killed by the other person, and the other person, let's call him the suspect. The suspect drove off with Campbell's body and hid the car with the body in it, and came back to the scene where the girls heard footsteps and drove Campbell's four-seater off. After a little while, another car drove towards the opposite direction. That's the car when the girl just got into her front gate, the one she heard rushing past. So that's the inspector's interpretation. But I think it's different. I think it's something different. First of all, when they had a fight, I'm pretty sure the four-seater does belong to Campbell and the two-seater belong to the suspects, even though it was dark and the girl didn't see exactly who killed who. She just saw two people fighting on the ground, and one carried the other to the car and drove off. So I think maybe it was not Campbell who was killed at this point. Campbell actually killed somebody else. I've got a few reasons. First of all, this girl saw the face of this dead man. He says he was clean shaven and with eyes shut. So we only know this person who's dead at this point has a clean shaven face. So it doesn't say the face is Campbell's face. And so that gives us a clue to go back and check everybody's appearance. Who has a beard? Who has a clean shaven face? So far, we only know that Gowan has a grand black beard, and all the rest seems to have clean shaven face or have a small mustache. This is the first reason. Second reason, the doctor said Campbell was killed about midnight. This is almost 2 hours before midnight. I think they should be able to tell if Campbell was killed 2 hours earlier than midnight. That's the second reason I think it was not Campbell who was killed at this point. And another reason is 3 out of the 6 suspects are still missing at the moment. We haven't seen them since the night of the murder. They could be dead themselves. We just haven't found out. So this is the first thing I disagree with the inspector. I don't think this is Campbell who was killed. Secondly, the inspector thinks this suspect drove off, hit a car, and walked back to pick up Campbell's car. I don't think that's possible. This feels way too fast. I don't think there was enough time for him to do that. I think he just drove straight off back to Gatehouse. And this person who walked back, it's a complete different person, probably who saw the accident, who saw the whole fight and the murder, hidden in the darkness, just like the girl, and now decide to come up and have a close look what happened. And I think when the girl heard an engine started up, it was this person started up Campbell's car and drove it off to Kirkcudbright. That's my theory. So apart from checking what everybody looks like, we can also now check what kind of car everybody has. The third thing we can check is what was everybody doing at 10:15 when the accident happened. For example, I don't think it was Waters in that second car because Waters was still in the pub at that point, I think, and Wimsey himself tucked Waters in bed and left him at 10:30. If I remember the timing correctly, it couldn't have been Waters. So that's what I think so far. Hi, hello, it's been a few days and Lord Peter Wimsey has now realized who the murderer is and I haven't. So I thought I will check in with you at this point before I read on, because I think from this point on, Lord Peter Wimsey is going to reveal little by little what actually happened. In my previous clip, I said there were two things I disagreed with the inspector's interpretation of the situation. I was right about the first point. I'm very pleased to report that, and I was not right about the second point. I also chatted with a friend who does oil painting. We read through the description of the painting itself, and we read through the different paint tubes that were laid out on the ground at the scene, and we checked all the colors. And Ellie thought, thanks Ellie for checking this with me, and Ellie thought it was the white paint that was missing. And it's been quite interesting to read the last few chapters, because if it was the white paint that was missing, the author kept dropping hints about it. And since then, a lot of things happened, and every suspect gave an account of their Monday evening all the way till Tuesday, Wednesday, even later on in the week. I made another massive spreadsheet, another massive table recording what everybody said, what they were doing at the time, and I'm still clueless. I think more than one person was involved, but I can't quite understand why multiple people were involved, what their motives were. So I have some notes. I've been keeping notes, and I want to just at least tell you what questions I've been asking and trying to find out. And at the end, at least we know if we were anywhere near the truth, if we were even asking the right question, or if we were completely off the track. So here's some of my questions. The first question is, where did Campbell go after the car accident? So after Campbell has beaten Gowan into a pulp and left him half dead in the middle of nowhere, where did he go? You remember the second car Helen, the little girl, heard speeding past her as she just got into her front gate? That car went towards the Kirkcudbright direction. If that was Campbell, then Campbell went to Kirkcudbright. If that was not Campbell, then Campbell went to Gatehouse, which is his home direction. And if that was not Campbell, who was in that car? And they might have seen Campbell on the road because they would have driven past each other. So that's one question. According to Ferguson's witness, about midnight, somebody drove home and left again. If that was Campbell, why did he come home and leave again? What did he see in his house? It's possible that Campbell drove to Kirkcudbright and looked for Mrs. Farron again and asked for some help because Campbell was hurt in the fight. I think he broke some bones as well. So it's possible he went there to ask for help, and the whole thing started with Farron discovered Campbell in his house along with his wife. So it's possible when Campbell went back again and Farron decided to kill him once for all, and they really got into some quite serious argument and fight. So another question is about this white paint. Let's say it is a white paint tube that is missing. Why is it missing? One reason could be that the painter did the painting, left with the white paint by accident, which is not very likely, I'd say. He left everything else there. And the second reason could be that the painting was done somewhere else completely, and when the person got the painting to the scene, he forgot to pick up the white paint. I think that's more likely. And the painting was still wet when they discovered the body at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which means the painting must have been done sometime that morning. Who did the painting and how did the painting get there? Somebody spotted Campbell driving that morning about 8 o'clock, I think between 8 and 9 that morning. That was definitely the fate Campbell again, because Campbell was dead by then. So was that the same person who was wearing Campbell's coat and hat pretending to be him? Did the painting in a studio somewhere, put the painting in a car, in Campbell's car, drove the painting and possibly the dead body to the scene, laid everything out, laid the easel out, pretended painting between 10 and 11 while the painting was actually already done. And another very curious thing is that somebody ate Campbell's breakfast. Who ate Campbell's breakfast? I think they had to eat his breakfast to show that he was still alive at that point, but I just felt like that was a very specific detail and might need some consideration. And who ate Waters' breakfast? Another suspicious thing was the car that came to Waters' house in the middle of the night and drove him away. He said it was a friend from uni who asked him to go fishing with him, and he was on the sea and even in Ireland for the whole week. I think that was completely a lie. I think it must have been somebody, one of the suspects in that car, and drove him away for some reason. And it was reported that he left the house in a Burberry, and specifically said an old Burberry. And the second time a Burberry appeared was when Graham came back on Wednesday, appeared in Kirkcudbright in an ancient Burberry. I feel like it was the same Burberry, but why would they exchange outfit unless they were trying to fake some alibi? So I think both Waters and Graham were involved in the crime somehow, especially the alibi bit. And I am also very certain Waters was involved in faking this painting. But I think he didn't kill Campbell, he just faked the painting for some reason. But I don't know why, if he didn't kill Campbell, he would get himself involved in faking this painting. Let's just have a wild guess, since I have no better idea what actually happened. I think since Farron and Strand, in both of their accounts, they both mentioned they went to the mine and fell in some mine shafts and knocked themselves out and spent the night there. I think that must be true. So it could be something like Campbell and Farron somehow both end up in the mines, and they had a fight there because Farron was drunk. He pushed Campbell down a mine shaft, or he thought he did, or it looked like he did, but I think actually it was an accident. Campbell fell in himself. And when Strand arrived a bit later, he saw Campbell at the bottom of a mine shaft, and Farron either knocked out himself or panicking, don't know what to do, because Farron said, "Oh, I killed him," because he's drunk. And then Strand said, "Oh dear, he killed Campbell, let's fake something to get Farron out of this," because they are actually friends. So Strand and Farron, they are friends. So it's likely Strand said, "Oh, don't say anything to your wife, just run, I will take care of this." So Strand took the body out of the mine shaft, dragged it all the way to his car, and drove the body somewhere, who knows, dropped it in the river later on Tuesday afternoon. So Farron has time to fake an alibi. So I think that's what happened on that side of things. So how Campbell was killed. I think, knowing Dorothy L says, I will put my bet on it was an accident. It was not actual murder. We'll see. So the mystery is Waters and Graham. Why would they get themselves involved in faking alibi for Farron? I have no idea about that. And another person is Ferguson. We haven't mentioned at all. His alibi seems to be too watertight. It was completely accurate, precise. That's his character, said the author. So I think he must be involved in some way as well. But I can't tell how. His alibi was just too perfect. But yeah, that's my conclusion so far. I can't do better than this, I think. I will now go on, keep reading the last 30% and see what I've got right and what I've got wrong and what actually happened. Before we go all the way to the end, I'd like to show you a map of the area, a map of Galloway. First of all, it's because the location of various places plays a very important role. And secondly, just to show you how things have stayed the same, how the towns and villages are still all there. The 5 Red Herrings was published in 1931 and it's been about 90 years, over 90 years, and most of the places are still there. It's pretty fascinating. I just like to show you how it looks. So you can see this is a Google map and you can see Glasgow and Edinburgh there. And this is the Galloway area we're looking at the southwest corner of Scotland. This is Dumfries, where the train station was mentioned a couple of times. And from Dumfries, you can get to Carlisle, which is a northwest town in England. And via Carlisle, you go south and you get to London that way. So that's where Gowan went. You can also take a train from Dumfries all the way to Glasgow there. That's one way you get to Glasgow, and this is Kirkcudbright there, and this is Howself Fleet, and this is Newton Stewart. We will zoom in a bit more later, but I just want to show you a high level map for now. And this is Stranraer, and the train goes all the way from Stranraer along somewhere here called Bar Hill. That's Bar Hill. We'll zoom in, and this is Girvan. And it goes to Ayr along the coast, and from Ayr you can go to Glasgow. That's the journey somebody else took to Glasgow. I will not say too much. So if we zoom in, yeah, so the train goes from Stranraer to Bar Hill. This bit is where the dead body, Campbell's dead body, was found. So our guy left the dead body there, cycled along there to Bar Hill. Oh look, that's the train station. That was one point he had a chance to get on the train, and then the train goes along there, go to Girvan. That's another chance he can get on the train. The train then take him to Glasgow. There used to be a train line from Gatehouse of Fleet all the way to Dumfries. That line doesn't exist anymore, which is a shame. A lot of local smaller train lines got closed down in the 1960s, where everybody thought the future belonged to the cars and nobody was going to take train anymore. But luckily, the line from Stranraer to Ayr still exists. This is a map of the ScotRail in this area, so you can see from Stranraer here to Bar Hill and Girvan and Ayr all the way to Glasgow, just like it was in the story. And I want to show you another map, which is a OS map, Ordnance Service map. We can see some more details of this area. I like looking at OS map. This is Gatehouse and this is Kirkcudbright. So this is the road Campbell drove along on that fatal Monday night from Kirkcudbright to Gatehouse direction, where the accident happened. So this is the S-bend, and it was at this shallower S-bend the car accident happened, and this is where poor little Helen witnessed the whole car accident and the fight, and one of these little squares was very likely to be her house. And if we keep going north to the Gatehouse and zoom in a little bit more, and you can see very clearly this is the Standing Stone Pool. I just find that fascinating. So Standing Stone Pool is where Campbell and Ferguson's cottages supposed to be in the story. Dorothy L said in her introduction, the trains are all real trains, the timetables are all real timetables, and the places are all real places. She just added a couple of houses for people to live in, and I think this must be one of the place she added a couple of cottages for Campbell and Ferguson to live, because the story says it's quite a quiet and remote place, not many people there. Those are the only two cottages, and you can see on this map there aren't any houses there. It's somewhere, the cottages are somewhere along this road, but whichever it is, it doesn't have any real houses there. And you can see here, this is the Gatehouse Golf Club, Strand's Gatehouse Golf Club. It's still there, it's still in use. If we go out of town a little bit more, you remember the story says the Gatehouse train station is 6 miles out of town. See if we can find it. Here we go. This is the dismantled railway. Used to be the train line. We know so well from the story, and this is the Gatehouse station. It's not a station anymore, obviously. The train doesn't run anymore, but yeah, OS Maps still have that on its map. And I think in the story it actually says the road stops abruptly there, and then there is a viaduct which is still there. I just find that really cool. This is a journey Wimsey took when he first heard about this accident, and he drove from Kirkcudbright. There is a very detailed description of all the places he drove past. So he drove past Gatehouse, and then along the coast there to Creetown, and then to Newton Stewart, and along this river he go all the way there, and then we can zoom in, and this Bar Grennan is where the body was found. So this was where also the fake Campbell was painting on that Tuesday morning, where he was spotted. So if you go there, you can still walk all the way up that track and see the place. I have now finished the story, and I have spoiled it enough so I won't tell you what the ending is and who the murderer is. But you'd be glad to know, although I was right at a couple of points, I'm almost nowhere near. So I haven't spoiled much, really. The things that I was right very specific about the bit I was right, because mostly I wasn't. So the bit I was right was the white paint, and it was a kind of an accident. And apart from that, everything was nowhere near. I won't go through all the questions I asked in my previous clip one by one, but 2 questions I asked were actually on the right track. One was, where was Campbell after the car accident? And the second was, what happened to the white paint? Those were the right questions to ask. I just didn't get the right answers. And a few complaints about Dorothy L. Sayers. One thing is, there are so many irrelevant clues. I was basically reading too much into it, and I don't think that was quite fair. For example, after Waters and Graham had a painting experiment for Wimsey to work out how long this painting would actually take the murderer, they both did the painting, and after they finished, Wimsey suddenly said, "Ha! I know who the murderer is." And water, he says, water turned white and red. And I took that as a clue to mean he was guilty, or he had this guilty conscience. But it turned out to be nothing to do with his guilty conscience at all. Like, it doesn't say why he turned white and red at all. And another incident was, for example, when Wimsey asked Strand what happened that Monday night, where was he? Why didn't he go home? And he told this whole story about he went to look for Farron, and Farron got drunk, and they both were in the mine, and they had a fight. And Wimsey said, "Did you see Farron there?" And the text says, Strand hesitated and said, "Yes." I took that as a clue as well, because why would he hesitate if he had nothing to hide? And it wasn't explained in the end why he hesitated either. It was just he hesitated. And I think I was reading too much into this kind of small details, but I think if they were not relevant, why did she put them in? It's just very misleading. And the second thing I'd like to complain was that the alibi of the actual murderer completely depended on sheer luck. I don't think that was very fair either, because no matter how much you think through the train time, how much they can cycle, where they cycle to, if there were elements that were completely out of the murderer's control, which means we couldn't take that into account either, because how would we know something just happened and helped him to establish this alibi? I don't think that's very fair. When I read it, I nearly threw my Kindle across the room. I was like, What was the author thinking? In comparison, I have to say, at the beginning of this video, I said I preferred Sayers' story, but I have to say at this point, Agatha Christie's murder mysteries were a lot tighter woven. There's no unnecessary clue or dialogue or description of a place at all. Everything is relevant to the murder mystery and to help you to find out who the murderer is. Every detail in Christie's murder mystery has a significance. I can't say that about Sayers' story at all. But having said that, I still enjoyed the reading experience very much. Her story is definitely warmer, cozier, and a more light read for a murder mystery. I was laughing a lot along the way. It was just quite funny at many points, and it wasn't grim like Agatha Christie's story. Reading Sayers, it was just always a very pleasant experience. That's the end of my murder mystery solving vlog. Hope you enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed the whole experience. It was great fun. I loved reading it. I loved thinking about all of these suspects and what happened and everything. It was great fun. I hope you get to read it at some point as well, and I hope this video has made you interested and hasn't spoiled enough to make you think it's not worthwhile anymore. But I hope you enjoyed watching me solving the murder mystery and hope that was fun. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next one.